Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Dialogue. I'm Taimur Shamil. Strategic shifts are taking place regionally and internationally, and we see that the developments that are taking place regionally, first of all, in South Asia, we see that in Afghanistan, the inter-Afghan talks have started between the Taliban and the Afghan government, and now they are working on a ceasefire. Peace in Afghanistan is very important when it comes to regional stability, and this is exactly what we are going to discuss today. The prospects for regional connectivity and stability, and the future dynamics for Pakistan's foreign policy. Talking about Afghanistan, having peace over there is essential. That is very important for Pakistan. But in the region, if we see, the security dynamics are not going that well. If we look at the geostrategic side of the region as well, on the Indian side, we see that there is rise of ultra nationalism, this rise of saffron tide in India, the rise of Hindutva ideology in India. So we see that somehow the prospects for stability and connectivity are crippled. On the western border, they are crippled because of the security situation in Afghanistan. If you look at the potential that is there for Pakistan in the Central Asian states, that is huge. Even the prospects for trade and economy are huge, but they are crippled because of the security situation and political situation in Afghanistan. That needs to be addressed. We'll be discussing about this in our show. On the eastern border, the aggression from the Indian side, the way India has been showing aggression in Indian occupied Kashmir for that matter, that is a big issue for Pakistan and for the regional stability as well. In the north, we see that Pakistan and China have been collaborating on China-Pakistan economic corridor, a mega economic activity that is going to benefit not just Pakistan and China, but the region as well. But still, there are opportunities as well as challenges. We'll be discussing about these opportunities and challenges. Looking at Iran, in the past few months back, 6 months back, we saw the rift that was there, and it still persists between Iran and the Gulf states, Iran and United States of America for that matter. So the situation even in Middle East is not that bright, not that positive. So what are the options for Pakistan? When Pakistan wants to improve its relations with the neighborly countries, first of all, it has to look at the prospects that are there. And if the external environment is somehow, the regional environment is a bit hostile, then what are the options for Pakistan? What are the foreign policy options for Pakistan? We're going to discuss about this with our special guest today in our show. In the studios, we are joined by Ambassador Aslam Rizvi, renowned senior diplomat and expert on Pakistan's foreign policy. So, welcome to the show. On Skype, we are joined by Dr. Huma Bakai, renowned senior academic and analyst based in Karachi. Welcome, Dr. Bakai. And in a while, we'll be joined by Mr. Muhammad Ali, expert on an analyst on Pakistan's foreign policy, and Dr. Waqar Ahmed, renowned economist. I'll start with Dr. Bakai. Dr. Bakai, looking at the strategic shifts that are taking place in the region and internationally, let's start with what is happening in Afghanistan for that matter. The prospects for Pakistan's stability, connectivity, how do you see it, and how do you see the regional dynamics?
Well, you see, I don't think the shift is global. The shift may be regional, but essentially globally we see a regression. And the regression is that the Cold War that was outplayed in different parts of the world is perhaps the new Cold War is unfolding right here in this region. So yes, there is a thrust for connectivity in the region, which in Pakistan we read as the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, which is also hostage to our relationship on the eastern and western borders. However, the kind of commitment, momentum, and thrust that China has shown to take it forward may enhance and improve regional connectivity. But at the same time, if you see the conflict matrix, the global conflict matrix and its reflections in South Asia, you would realize that it may emerge as an impediment. And we see this in the deteriorating relationship with between India and China, and how every single state in the region is a part of the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, except perhaps India. And that remains an impediment because if China-Pakistan economic corridor is supposed to take off, we need to have at least functional relationship with on both our borders. Yesterday, Dr. Abdullah left, and there was a lot of euphoria, and we are hope and a lot of hope, and everybody's talking about seizing the moment. And Pakistan has done things to improve relations with Afghanistan, but on the Indian side, there is complete stonewalling of any initiative and all the initiative that Pakistan takes, and that will remain a challenge. And now that the relationship with China is also deteriorated, and there's almost a confrontational paradigm governing the relationship between the two countries, it's going to make the situation even more challenging. However, I think that for Pakistan, connectivity is important because connectivity, the regions of influence for connectivity for Pakistan are not just South Asia. It is also Central Asia and the Middle East.
Okay.
And if because South Asia remains the least integrated region in the world, we all know that. So I personally think that if we sort of bring a shift in our focus and let SEMECA be the region where from South Asia you have a thrust towards connectivity with Central Asia and perhaps Middle East, then the momentum would propel countries like India to rethink their foreign policy thrust. So, because right now, India is perhaps the largest country and the only country which is looking at extra regional alliances for its growth and
Right.
progress. So I think that is a real challenge. Pakistan at least is on board. Pakistan wants to go ahead with it. Pakistan has categorically said that the thrust of its foreign policy is now geoeconomics and not geopolitics.
Right, right. Dr. Bakay, please stay with us. Ambassador Rizvi, this point is very important that India has to rethink its foreign policy. But if we, let's say, want to have better connectivity in the region, on the eastern side, in the past, we have seen that India has been dominating SAARC to much extent. And India would only rethink its foreign policy when India would realize the cost for not cooperating with the regional countries. Do you think that now India is heading in that direction where not cooperating with other states would cost it dearly, would be high cost for India?
I don't think at the moment they have realized what is costing them to follow this policy.
Right.
And even though because of the coronavirus disaster that they are facing, from there that should make them rethink that to tackle that it is important that they improve relations with the neighbors in particular. SAARC is moribund because of the objection by India, and only recently Pakistan offered to rehost the SAARC summit, but there has been turned down on their part. The fact is that India is at the moment focusing on two aspects. One is the Hindutva policy and the anti-Muslim and minorities policies in India. That's the internal. This is what the Modi thought got him into power on the second time and with a greater majority. And the issues that are really of concern to the populace in large in India are the matters to do with the economy of the country, the unemployment, things of that nature.
Right.
But they are going, heavy-handed on this aspect of it. The second thing is that they have adopted a kind of a policy to ignore Pakistan. This has been said that they want to, but at the same time, they are, doing something which is almost bordering on criminality. On the line of control, every day they are shelling and they are firing and using heavy guns and so on. And you see families and houses being destroyed on part of Pakistan. And Pakistan, although the military does say that we have answered them back in appropriate manner, but the fact remains that on the other side, there are no build-up areas. It's all military and they have vacated the whole area. So this is something which we need to address, because it's a hybrid war kind of thing. And at the same time, of course, as you mentioned earlier about Afghanistan, their interference in Pakistan by using TTP and others form across Afghanistan for actions in Balochistan and the rest of the country, trying to inflame sectarian differences in the country. So they're not in a mood for cooperation.
Right.
And all the more, it is important that to point out that, some years back, Pakistan, India, Pakistan and Iran had signed an agreement, IPI, for the gas pipeline coming in from Iran to Pakistan, going across to India. And well, I think 2008 or around that time, they backed out of it. And it was because of the pricing. And the second of the gas, and the second was on the security aspect. And then they decided that it is far cheaper and better for them to have a direct linkage by the sea to receive from
And probably international pressure
yes.
as well.
So this is one example where they could have cooperated. Now the other one that transcends the whole region is the TAPI, Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, India pipeline.
Right.
The energy sector coming from there. And again, that is, I think, not only because of Afghanistan situation, but also what is happening in India. The Turkmenistan have done some part of the construction. Afghanistan has done some of it. Pakistan also has done some sectors of development on that, but nothing from the Indian side.
Right.
And the last thing, I would say that we also have the CASA, the Central Asia and South Asia 1000, the electricity pipeline coming from Kyrgyzstan, Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, and Afghanistan. So these are various energy sectors where there is a good possibility of cooperation which would benefit everyone. And let me also add another dimension to this. I mean, if India is looking obviously to having its outlet and trade and economic cooperation with Central Asia, and that's why they opted to construct Shah Bahar port and to have a which is now of course cancelled out. But just think of it, how much easier and better it would have been if they were to cooperate with CPEC. So to your question, I see we don't see for the time being any positive support from India for infrastructure cooperation or even economic cooperation or energy cooperation.
Right. So, Dr. Bakai, when we talk about the regional connectivity, let's say, or a better foreign policy, do you think that the issue is with the structural dynamics, regional structural dynamics, or do you think that Pakistan needs to work on proactive foreign policy and proactive diplomacy? Because we cannot wait for the region to change and there would be conducive environment and then we can work on it. We have to work on the environment, make it conducive for Pakistan so that we can work on our transformation. How do you see this?
Well, I'm going to start off by saying that interestingly, all the Asian countries, none of them in their indigenous languages have a term for Asia. They just don't have it. So it is an imposed construct. But having said this, I think the way things have shaped up over the years, somehow South Asia has emerged as one of the least integrated regions in the world, and that is because our political thrust has always overtaken our economic thrust. I mean, logic, rationale, good thinking, everything demands the poverty in this region the poor of this region, all of that demands that we should integrate and take the economic potential of this region to the next level. And also because now this region houses countries that have the youngest population in the world. So there has to be this integration for us to go forward. But having said this, there is something that I always sort of say to India. And I say that India has to make, because I think India, it's Pakistan and India are the protagonists South Asia, and Pakistan has brought about a paradigm shift in its foreign policy, in spite of the deteriorating relationship with India and whatever India has been doing in the past so many years under Modi's government. Pakistan has still kept the option of dialogue on the table. So Pakistan
Right.
has changed its thrust. A very important question is that every commentator on the economic future of the world categorically says that the 21st century would be an Asian century. Now, there is a very conscious decision that India has to make. And that conscious decision is, because it is the second largest growing economy, it is so called a huge democracy. It's a huge country despite what is happening in it right now under the Modi government. What India has to decide, what the Indians have to decide is, not even India, I won't say the government, what the Indians, the thinking Indians have to decide is that when the 21st century is going to be referred to as the century of as the Asian century, will it allow it to be the Chinese century? Or will India become a part of this convergence and allow it to be the Asian century? Because when India alienates itself from the region, looks at extra regional alliances, becomes a tool in the powers of extra regional powers to allow them to carry on their agendas in South Asia, there are choices that India is making which is going to haunt India's future, because this is going to be the 21st. Asia is going to be, 21st century is going to be Asia's. And India has to decide. India has to make that very, very important call that whether it is going to bury its differences, its ego, its Hindutva paradigms, its expansionism, and for the sake of its own people, for the sake of its own glory, for the sake of the stature that it looks for itself in the world, the way India behaves right now, that's a huge impediment. Moreover, look at the momentum that the Chinese thrust is taking over. One of the most important questions asked in the post-COVID-19 world, or about the post-COVID-19 world, is that is the global leadership going to China? So I
Right.
think that is where a lot of rethinking has to take place. And more importantly, we talk about this new Cold War. This new Cold War is unfolding in this region. It is not going to be on the lands, it's going to be on the seas. But once again, where will India be? On the right side of the history or on the wrong side of the history? Because all the institutions of India, everything that India stood for, whether it was constitutionalism, secularism, democratic norms and values, inclusivity, diversity, all of them stand hollow today. And it's a decline that India would find very difficult to reverse. And of course, it's going to have a huge impact on Pakistan because we are a neighbor, we have a history, there is a conflict going on. But at the same time, Pakistan is actually moving on with the requisite shifts that are required to move on. So it is looking towards Central Asia, it is improving its relations with Afghanistan. I think Dr. Abdullah's visit was a historic visit. It is going to completely change the dynamics between the two countries if everything goes well. It was perhaps for the first time that Dr. Abdullah actually came out and said that he will not allow the land of Afghanistan to be used against any country, including Pakistan. And when he said Al Qaeda and ISIS, he
Right.
also talked about Tehreek-e-Taliban in Pakistan. I think that's a major paradigm shift in how Afghanistan used to treat these organizations or these outfits. And this will bring more convergence between Pakistan and Afghanistan. We've eased out visa restrictions. We've opened more days for the pedestrians to move in. There are border markets coming up on the border of Afghanistan and Iran. So if you see that despite the problems and the challenges that exist, Pakistan is choosing to move on and sort of capitalize on whatever it can to give the geo-economic thrust of its foreign policy a face, form, and several manifestations. And there were a lot of things that were mentioned by the other participant. All of them are right now, they have huge potential, but that potential has to be realized. So once again, what I want to say to India through your program and the sane thinking India is that this momentum is going to go forward. We are going to move forward. Geo-economic paradigm of this region, including connectivity, is going to move forward. Will India choose to become a part of it, or will India will leave a legacy of being an impediment to it?
Right, right. Very well said, Ambassador Rizvi. We're going to take a break, but before that, how do you see this very interesting point that is India going to be part of the solution or part of the problem when it comes to the rise of Asia or the Asian century for that matter, or the rise of China for that matter, by abrogating 370, 35A, going for a battle with China on the borders, not having good relations with Nepal, with Bangladesh for that matter, strained relations with Sri Lanka to some extent. We don't see India being part of the solution, but India is a big country and it has been not in the right direction. How do you see this whole thing?
Yes, this is most unfortunate because India with its population, resources, and the favorable outlook that it had been enjoying from the West, it could play a very dominant and very positive role in the region. And when SAARC was created, there was the rest of the countries, SAARC members thought that India's idea to dominate them, and India was worried that we'll all gang up against India itself. But look at it. I mean, the whole world is cooperating. You have, CETO, I beg your pardon. You have the ASEAN. You have other groupings all over the countries. Economic cooperation taking
SCO
place.
for that.
Here, it is worse because India is not looking to really think in terms of cooperating and development, peace and security in the region. It is, on the contrary, has a different outlook, as I mentioned earlier from there. Now, how long will this continue? Because as you see, that there is now the policies that they are following is now having an effect on the world outside. You can see that the human rights violations, the situation in Kashmir, and the others, the people are speaking up now, and they had to even ban the close offices of the human rights organizations, etc.
Yes.
So unfortunately, this is the case, and they are not in the same secular India that it used to be. Now they have now totally gone, towards the Hindutva policy, and it is to be seen as many of the right-thinking people in India feel that this is going to be, going to do immense harm to the country, and they are speaking out from there. And some of those who dare to speak out are victimized and so forth. I mean, imagine what had happened to a journalist from Kashmir who was forced to say that India, Hindustan Zindabad, and he said no, Pakistan Zindabad, and the next day he was killed. So this is the kind of fascist and the Nazism policy that is taking place from there.
Right.
So it is to be seen that when they have the next election, whether this policy is going to affect the present government or it will not.
Right.
We have also seen that similar rightist policies elsewhere in the world, in particular his greatest supporter Trump, he's having a setback on account of that policy.
This is a very interesting point. This global rise of right wing and extremism for that matter. We'll be discussing about this in our program after this break. Stay with us. Welcome back. We are discussing building regional connectivity for Pakistan, the prospects and challenges that are there for Pakistan in the region. Dr. Bakai, we were talking about Afghanistan, and as you just mentioned, that Dr. Abdullah of Afghanistan was visiting Islamabad. His visit was taken well in Islamabad. But recently, we have seen the resurgence of TTP, of Jamaatul Ahrar and Hizbul Ahrar, and these organizations have been operating freely in Afghanistan. Now, the issue is that many experts in the region, even in Afghanistan, they're of the view that the Kabul government certainly does not have much control on the areas in which these organizations operate. But obviously, the concern is there for Pakistan. If we want to have peace and stability in the region, in Afghanistan specifically, how can Pakistan and Afghanistan address this issue of terrorist organizations jointly?
Well, I think part of it was discussed during the visit because that was the elephant in the room. Both Pakistan and Afghanistan have this mindset that perhaps our lands are used against the other. Of course, Pakistan is completely committed to not sponsoring any kind of terror into any country. And that is why, despite the opposition that came from the Afghan side, we built this fence on a very difficult terrain. So if India is building a fence to keep terrorism out for Pakistan, then perhaps Pakistan is building a fence. You can't have a fence built for different reasons on different borders. Having said this, like I said earlier, Dr. Abdullah was committed to combating terror. But I think the most, or not allowing the land to be used against Pakistan, and that is a major sensitivity for Pakistan. The use of Afghan land against Pakistan to attack SAPEC, to promote insurgency in Balochistan, of which we have tangible proof, the dossiers have actually been given to international organizations. If you remember, in Sharm el-Sheikh, the former Prime Minister of India had actually agreed to look into this, and then when he went back, of course, he had to go back to what he'd agreed. But all of this is indicative of the fact that it's a reality and it is happening. And when Abdullah makes a commitment to not allowing it to happen, it addresses some of the concerns. But I think the major problem here is that yes, the conflict on the ground should go down. These outfits should not be allowed to function in Afghanistan. And one of the commitments that the Taliban made to the United States of America when it insisted on the withdrawal of foreign troops was that they will not allow the Afghan land to be used against any other state or the United States for that, or interest of United States. So I think that responsibility lies with the Taliban, for one, and also every sane country, including Pakistan, including Afghanistan, has pointed out towards a hurried withdrawal of American forces, which would create a security vacuum in Afghanistan, which could be extremely problematic, not just for Afghanistan, but for Pakistan also. We also need to understand, Shamil, that this conflict has been going on for 40 years. When a conflict goes on for 40 years, there's a conflict economy, there is a war economy. Even our Prime Minister, our Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi had pointed out towards it. There are lobbies and groups that have stakes in the status quo, and they will resist tooth and nail to not let this peace process move forward. So the spoilers need to be addressed. And I personally think, and that was one of the questions I posed also at the distinguished lecture, that Pakistan and Afghanistan should come together to have collaborative joint mechanisms to defeat these spoilers. We should have sharing of intelligence, remove the trust deficit, and be totally committed to not let these spoilers or these outfits or these groups to, one, sabotage the peace and the peace and stability in the region, or the peace process for that matter. Unless that kind of commitment has tangible dimensions and manifestations, the chances are that the spoilers will come in and try to do whatever. So those are the pitfalls that we need to look for, to be cautious of. And the way forward is to work on mechanisms, collaborative arrangements to make sure that we stop them. And I also think that Dr. Abdullah Abdullah said that in the Doha talks, there are 21 things the table, and he said he's not disappointed. He said that's the exact words. He's not disappointed about the progress that are being made on that. So I'm hoping that how this land is used, how Afghanistan has been hostage to the interest of those who wanted to play out their conflicts on the Afghan land are prevented and stopped from doing that. I think that is extremely important. And that is a pitfall we need to be cautious of. And if we are cautious of that, all of these problems that you're identifying towards, including the presence of these outfits, it will be addressed. It has largely been because the governance in Afghanistan has been weak. There is war on the ground, there's conflict on the ground. So we need to live peacefully without violence, coexist without violence. And within Afghanistan also, the groups need to learn to coexist without violence.
Right. We are joined by Dr. Waqar Ahmed. He is the Joint Executive Director of SDPI, an independent think tank based in Islamabad. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to the show, Dr. Waqar.
Thank you, Taimur Saab.
Right, Dr. Waqar, talking about the regional connectivity, we were discussing about Afghanistan, the peace prospects in Afghanistan. But when it comes to the trade between Pakistan and Afghanistan, we see that the numbers they're okay, perhaps not very encouraging. How do you think that Pakistan and Afghanistan, they can work on the regional connectivity and explore the potential that is there? Of course, that we know that it was crippled because of the security situation in Afghanistan. But talking about the future, about the regional potential of connectivity, how do you see it?
Yes, thank you very much, Taimur Saab. I think this is a very significant question. And certainly, Afghan peace dialogue opens up the doors for new trade and investment value chains between both countries. I think we have an opportunity to go back to the same trade levels which we had at the start of this decade, where both countries had a bilateral trade of somewhere around $5 billion, and it was, of course, projected to grow back then. But, of course, changing political conditions, there were implications. Now, once again, both countries have this opportunity. We are much encouraged to see that both commerce ministries have moved in this direction, and we are now seeing that Afghanistan-Pakistan transit trade agreement is being revised this year. We have also seen that the draft of preferential trade agreement, PTA, has also been shared between the two countries. I think these two agreements, if they can be operationalized quickly, these can really open up the avenues, not just for existing traders, but also for importers and exporters in new industries. Additionally, I think COVID has also presented an opportunity to both countries to improve trade and services. So we are looking at increased services trade in the health sector, for example.
Right. And Dr. Waqar, talking about the Central Asian potential for trade, and we have been discussing about TAPI and other projects that are there. What do you think that at the moment Pakistan and Afghanistan should start focusing on? Obviously, there would be this political setup that would be going on, but parallel to that, both Pakistan and Afghanistan have to focus on the contours of cooperation. What do you think can be the outline of cooperation in terms of trade and economy?
Indeed. I think the first and foremost is recognize that both CASA 1000 and TAPI projects present a good template going forward. And if any one of these or related transboundary energy projects can be operationalized, even in the next 5 to 7 years, I think they will become a template for future cooperation in energy resources as well. But I think there are low-hanging fruits over here as well. So to start with, something which was discussed with Mr. Abdullah as well while during his visit to Islamabad, was the potential to scale up trade via Gwadar. So we already know that from the Central Asian countries, Kyrgyz Republic as well as Tajik government has already submitted their request that they would like to access their food supply via Gwadar. And given that they also have their landlockedness impacting the certainty of their food security in their countries, they have contacted the Afghanistan government to also facilitate if their food supplies can be sourced from the Gwadar port via Afghanistan into Kyrgyz Republic and Tajikistan. So I think this could sort of in itself open up good avenues for trade and investment going forward in agriculture and processed food sector.
Thank you for joining us. Thank you for your time. Mr. Rizvi, Dr. Waqar just rightly mentioned about those specific areas where Pakistan and Afghanistan, they can cooperate and they can work on. But internally, when we talk about the infrastructure, or the services that we can provide to Afghanistan, or the products that we have, perhaps that we can work on to offer it to our neighbors, are we on the right direction? Are we working on that at the moment?
Well, in 2018, we have made a framework agreement, the Afghan-Pakistan Action Plan, political cooperation and for solidarity. And under that, there's a whole gamut of subjects which are covered, from political to military to economic to diplomatic to cooperation in social sectors and so on. So that is a forum which is very helpful, and we've had several meetings already from that. So that provides an opportunity for us to follow through on that. Just a quick mention about the coming back to the terrorists in Afghanistan.
Right.
Ahsanullah Ahsan was on the TV. I saw him mentioning the fact that the Taliban are already in contact with the various terrorist organizations, TTP and Al-Qaeda and IS and so on. And they have spelled out 27 rules under which they are to follow.
Right.
Otherwise, they will, will not be welcome. And these include no fresh recruitment, no moving out without permission, etc., from the areas. So, I mean, they are going to be active, but it remains to be seen how effectively they will be able to control. Let us hope that we have the joint action between us and Afghanistan.
Right.
Will be able to keep them in check.
Yeah.
And the landmark visit that we had of Mr. Abdullah, in which he reiterated that they will not allow
Right.
the Afghan soil to be used against Pakistan, is a welcome statement, and we hope that they will effectively do what they can to prevent that.
Right. Dr. Bakai, talking about Middle East, we have seen the recent shift taking place, diplomatic realignment, I would say, UAE and other Gulf states, the way they have been improving their diplomatic relations with Israel. How do you see these changes in the Middle East and its impact on Pakistan? Pakistan has very good relations with the Gulf states, but the challenges probably would be there, looking at Gulf states and Iran and Pakistan.
Middle East has been up in flames. There are wars going on in the Middle East. The security situation has become precarious. There is also this new paradigm that is now under discussion, which is the recognition of more Arab states, recognition of Israel by more Arab states. We all know that the elephant in the room is Iran. The recognition of Israel by UAE came because of the mistrust or insecurity that Iran's ability to mount proxy wars in Afghanistan generates among Arab states. Having said this, I think Pakistan has played its cards largely smartly. We have chosen to keep out of conflicts, and what we've categorically said, and I think it was never put forward in a more articulate fashion than by Prime Minister Imran Khan, that Pakistan's land will only be used to build bridges and to resolve conflicts, and Pakistan is not going to become a part of conflict. So if you remember when Soleimani was eliminated and there was talk of attacks on Iran and about Pakistan providing basis for the same, Pakistan categorically refused. They said we can become a bridge state between Iran and Saudi Arabia, or a bridge state between Iran and the United States to improve relations, to bring states closer, but we are not going to provide our land for any conflict. Pakistan will never become a part of a conflict matrix anymore. So I think that over there our position is fairly well stated. We chose to stay out of the Yemen war, and on the recognition of Israel also, we have a very categorical, principled stance. So I think Pakistan's Middle Eastern policy is fairly clear. Riyadh is important for us, so is Tehran. And more recently, if you remember, Khalilzad actually said that for the Afghan peace process, the United States is not averse to bringing in Iran on board. And there are 32 days to the elections in the United States. That is also going to help us understand the thrust of the American foreign policy and how it crystallizes. But for right now, I think Pakistan does its share of tightrope walking, but it has stayed on the right side of things, whether it was Syria or Yemen or the overall Middle Eastern policy.
Right, right. Dr. Bucayt, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for your time. Pleasure having you on the show. Ambassador Rizvi, thank you for joining us. Thank you for your time. That's all from today's dialogue. See you next time. Khuda Hafiz.